Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production of YouTube, and welcome to the return of the Friday review. Since this was absent last week, here it is, and today I am reviewing the debut full-length album from a speed metal band that are based out of Peru. It is, well, a self-titled debut album from Morvidhen, which, again, this album was released through both CD, cassette, I believe here, yes, and then digitally. Actually, 2 times on CD here. Apparently all limited edition on March 8th through, of course, the labels such as Ragnarok Records, and then independently for the digital release, and then on March 30th through, let me see this, Commando Thrash Zine, which is for the cassette release, and then on April 28th again on CD through Evil Rights Records. So again, there we go. So, Morvidhen. Since I bet most of you are pretty new to these guys, same for me, I am very new to these guys, but they definitely popped up on my radar, especially through the New Wave or Traditional Heavy Metal Full Albums channel on YouTube. So, again, they are from Lima, Peru, and they were formed all the way in 2010. And they released their very first demo in 2013 titled First Attack, then finally releasing their debut EP in 2015 titled Lethal Speed Metal, which one of the songs actually ends up getting put on the actual album here. Then finally, I guess, 6 years later, or it's 5 years later, seems like actually, they released their debut single titled Abandonado El Inferno, and which again is a track that's also on the sound. I know I was having a problem there pronouncing that again. I apologize for that. So finally, let's just get right into it, since this is right here their first full-length album. Let's get into their self-titled debut and what are my thoughts on this album. So let's just get right into it, okay? Let's get into it. Alright. So, the debut self-titled album from Morvidhen. We have at least about 10 songs here, and it all clocks in at 38 minutes and 38 seconds. So, 38. Okay, so these 10 songs are Morvidhen, which is a 2-minute and 29-second instrumental. Finally, it goes into our first real track on the album, being Desperada, Wild Lover, Abandonado, and El Inferno. Having trouble pronouncing that for some fucking reason. Again, it's another language. Okay, then Firewheels, Stand Up and Fight, Lethal Speed Metal, Nuclear Shelter, Claws of Hades, and finally ending with Soul of Steel. So there's your 10 songs. I know it was a little struggle there because there's one song that apparently I just can't seem to pronounce for some reason. Even though I can somewhat understand what it means. So there we go. And so what are my thoughts on this album? Since they are very new to me, again, this album, depending on what copies were, at least I think the reason why it's limited is because it's only limited to at least 300 copies, so who knows whether or not if there's any copies still available. Still, I'll get to that towards the end here. So, where to really begin with this, since I'm very brand new, and it seems to really taken this band at least 7 years later to actually release a debut full-length album, basically. Just a full-length album in general, it seemed like, since they were all formed all the way back in 2010. But since I've only given this album at least 2 listens, a couple of listens, and I think that is enough for me to really kind of take in and get just a good idea of what it is, because of this is more, I don't want to come off as negative, but it's just, it might come off that way, I guess, in a way which I apologize, but to be quite honest, this is almost your standard modern or retro style speed metal that I've been hearing for the past 7 years, where everything is just, rapidly fast, very flashy riffs in some cases, trying to be very, to try and recapture the speed metal stuff of like either Germany or even like Agent Steel or whatnot. All these bands are trying to, especially from some of these different countries, that are trying to sound like the 1980s, and this was kind of one of those albums. So it's very, I would say middle of the road, very typical retro style speed metal, basically, where it's just, again, if you're at least are familiar with a lot of these speed metal bands, I think the one band I can compare these guys to is the Spanish band Evil Killer. It's probably the one band I can compare them to. So again, if you're familiar with them, then you kind of know what you'll expect with this album. Again, it's mostly full throttle, keep the foot on the pedal, basically, on the gas pedal, basically, kind of style speed metal, where it's just very fast for the most part. There's some hooks here. I think, again, with a track like Desperada, I think it's one of the few songs, along with Fire Wheels, that actually, again, it has some of the more speed metal songs that really stick to me. The really fast ones, because for the most part, a lot of it is just like very samey in some cases, especially with a track like Lethal Speed Metal. I mean, it's probably the most unoriginal title you could come up with. I don't want to come off as a dick here, and I'm sorry if I am, but it's just the way I'm kind of... it's just my sort of honest opinion here, basically. Again, though, this is a debut album, okay? Let's definitely keep that in frame here, in our mind frame. It is a debut album. So they're going to at least pull out at least whatever the lyrics they got so far, until maybe they might change things up for the next couple of records, you know, if they were to keep going and whatnot. But again, songs like Lethal Speed Metal, you know, you kind of get the whole gist of what they're doing here. And again, it's fine. It's decent enough. I can listen to it and I have no problem with it. It's just that, again, I've heard this stuff so many times that I can't really say anything else that might be anything different or revolutionary. I'm not really adding anything else to the fucking topic, because everything else writes itself. So it's not terrible, but again, it's not overly, you know, ball-busting amazing, basically. It's alright. But again, I think of the two more faster speed metal songs, I think, again, Desperado and Fire Wheels are probably the two of the best songs for me on here that are of this caliber, of this sort of lineage here. But other tracks, there's at least some sort of songs where they do kind of at least pull back some of the pacing here. There's at least the song Claws of Hades. It begins with a very clean guitar track, which definitely, I wish that they would have added more of these kind of songs to kind of break up a little bit of the pace, because of it just becomes more fast, and half the time it becomes a little bit too tiresome in some places. It doesn't, it almost feels like I'm almost listening to most of the same shit for the most part of the album. So with the song like Claws of Hades, it kind of breaks up that sort of momentum, I think, and I kind of wish it needed more of this. This is just my opinion here, just my honest opinion. I feel like this album needed a bit more slower, more mid-paced tracks to kind of keep to make things more interesting with the album, because most part it just becomes the same. But the track Claws of Hades kind of has that. Again, it's very slow. It has a very galloping feel going on to it. It's actually it's just a great track for me on the album. Then, of course, it ends with Soul of Steel, which is another track that has very interesting feel. It's a very fast track, but the riff and on all that, it's more almost a very, very boogie-like track. Very something you expect, like, let's say, Vardis, for example. Or a very classic Motorhead song. It's got more of a boogie rock feel going on with this track, and I actually kind of dig it. Again, it feels a little different compared to most of the songs, which seem to always have like the same riff half the time. This one at least breaks up some of that sort of that entire pacing at the sort of, I guess, monotonous feel of some of the album. It kind of breaks up some of that, which is, I think, is a nice sort of change. So basically, the songs I really like from this one, I would say again, is Desperado, Fire Wheels, Claws of Hades, and then Soul of Steel. Those are pretty much the only four songs I actually kind of dig off this one. The rest of it is you either take it or leave it, basically. They're fine, but they don't really do much for me in terms of the overall spectrum of the album. Again, though, I should also, if you mention again, songs like Desperado and Abandonado and El Inferno, trying to best to say that at a much faster pace instead of trying to stutter there, because it's not a very easy title for me to say for fucking reason. Still, those are the only two songs that are actually sung in their native language, basically, okay? it is the only 2 songs that are sung in their native language. So, and they're fine tracks. So there we go. In the end, my overall ending thoughts, it's a fine album, but it's probably okay. So let's let me just get into my face here, alright? So, okay, there it is. It's my thoughts on this album here. And again, my rating, I'm going to be very generous here and give it a 7.90 out of 10. Again, I don't think this is a terrible record, but at the same time, since I've for as long as I've been reviewing albums, since at least 2014 or 2014, I was doing some list stuff for Rate Your Music. And for as long as I've been listening to or keeping up with a lot of the newer, traditional heavy metal bands from all sorts of the countries here, whether it be, again, I guess like a country like Peru, who are definitely trying to recapture sort of 80s sort of speed metal stuff. For as long as I've been listening to a lot of these albums, most of the time they always just end up blending into the background and they don't really do much, and nothing that really sticks out at me. And for the 7 years that I have been, to me, an album like this kind of falls into that. Cool, I mean, the artwork here is cool and everything, but again, I think with each album, I can expect them to mature more and really change things up, because I think that's what I think. Again, it's good enough for an album like this to be this sound, this raw and hungry in a way, but at the same time, since a lot of this really isn't breaking new ground, I know that's never really a great argument for me, because I don't feel like bands need to be that groundbreaking to even be good. But with an album like this, with a band like this, I think since this has been done so much by a whole lot of different bands, sometimes maybe even slightly better, I feel like they just end up blending into they just blend in. So it's fine enough. Again, I think I feel like, again, after this album, they probably will mature for sure. So with that, again, if this is an album that you might like, again, you go out and check this album out. Again, I'll leave you a link to their Bandcamp page. So with that, I hope all of you enjoyed this every Thrash Shed, saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone. Again, I'll leave you a link to their Bandcamp page.